Hi, I am Dr. Hannah and I have type 1 diabetes. I am a general practitioner and diabetes educator with a background in nutrition and lifestyle medicine. And I'm here today to talk about options out there that are effective for managing blood glucose while on shots. I truly believe, as I've proven to myself and seen many other people do, is that you can get the same level of great diabetes management on shots as pumps, even some of these newer, more autonomous pumps. Today, we're going to talk about tips and tricks that have worked for me. Now, just because I am a doctor, it doesn't mean that I'm your doctor. It's really important that you understand this is education only. There is no one right way to treat diabetes on shots. There are lots of strategies out there. These are ones that I find tried and true that have made a difference with my ability to maintain the levels that I want to have. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is tip number 1 is looking at long-acting insulin. Now, we live in a cool world. There are tons of long-acting insulins available right now, especially here in the US. I know that often health insurance companies will pick and choose which ones they'll cover, so that may limit your options. I have used many of them. I've used Toujeo, I've used Lantus, and I've used Tresiba. Personally, my favorite is Tresiba because it lasts a little bit longer, so I find that I have a little bit of leeway, but they're all good. I think they're all effective. It's just about figuring out how to make that one work for you. And with that, it may mean adjusting the dose. There is ideally a 1-to-1 conversion across long-acting insulins, but in my experience, not everyone has noticed that exact 1-to-1 conversion. So if you have to switch long-acting insulin types or you're transitioning, just know that you may need to readjust to figure out what works best for you for that particular brand. But the big tip here around long-acting insulin is, 1, you want to get the right amount for you. Understanding that your blood glucose in the morning when you wake up, assuming there wasn't any insulin or snacks before bed, was generally flatlined overnight. That's how you'll know that you have the right insulin dose with the long-acting. Now, it's going to take a couple trials to get whether or not that's the right fit. I noticed that the amount of long-acting insulin I need totally depends on what phase of my menstrual cycle that I'm in. I had to fine-tune understanding which long-acting insulin dose at what time of the month made the most sense for me. But really what you want is you want that straight line throughout the night. Now, often what people think, let's say you go to bed at 180, your blood sugar is 180 plus or minus throughout the night, you wake up around 180, that would mean that you need more insulin. The answer is yes, but not long-acting insulin. If you've got that straight line, then I know my long-acting insulin is in a place where it's level. The idea is, I don't want to be 180 all night. I won't wake up feeling as well. I won't rest as deeply probably if I was 100 all night, right? That's where I'd like to be, maybe even lower than that. But the point is that it's that straight line that tells you whether or not you're at a place where you have the right dose of long-acting insulin for you. A big tip, and harder to do but important, is really trying to take that long-acting insulin at the same hour every 24 hours. I've struggled with this over the years, and I used to not understand that it was as important as it is. What we're trying to do with these long-acting insulins is create a basal rate, essentially create an amount of insulin that's steady in your system throughout the day. If we are overlapping at different times or spaces between where that is, it's gonna change that basal rate and make other things like bolusing for meals or treating lows more complicated, less predictable. A great habit around long-acting insulin dosing for me has been setting an alarm on my phone. If I set an alarm, and I had to make a rule for myself because I wasn't great at it in the beginning, was if I set an alarm for long-acting insulin, I like to do mine in the evening around the time I would typically brush my teeth on a weeknight. So I'd set the alarm and I don't let myself turn off the alarm until I am walking to where my long-acting insulin is to take it, or I'm starting to take it, because that sound is annoying. And so it reminds me like, okay, I gotta do this. I committed to doing this. If I just turn it off and snooze it, it's very easy for me to go back to what I'm doing and forget. But that every 24 hours is true whether you're on some of the shorter acting, aka 24-hour Lantus, Levemir, or the longer acting, long-acting insulins like Tresiba, which lasts much greater than 24 hours. The intent is that you still take it every 24 hours unless you and your physician have a different strategy. That's typically how they're recommended from the manufacturer. 1, making sure I have the right dose of long-acting insulin based on the straight line, not based on where that blood glucose level is. And then 2, making sure I take it at the same time every day. If you like the information that I'm putting out and you want to help other people and you can subscribe, that will make a big difference to me because it allows me to continue to make time to give these free videos, which is something that I really want to do. And so I would so appreciate it. With that, we're going to talk about our second topic, which is pre-bolusing for meals. Now, this is an art, I think, as much as it is a science. And when we talk about meal bolusing, as you probably already know, we use short-acting insulin. There are many on the market. Humalog, Novolog, Fiasp are some of the most common that I see used. There are others as well. Difference between Fiasp and another Lumjev is that they kick in a little bit faster than the traditional Humalog and Novolog that have been around longer. The difference in that timing is going to be how you notice your graph change after you take them. And that will change your action step as far as when to eat, when to know if a correction is working, etc. An important part of getting your blood sugar in range most of the time is getting your insulin to kick in a way where you're digesting, right? The idea is to match that on the graph. So what we would look at is if we have a graph here, and maybe I should learn how to do the text so that we can get actual graphs one day. But if we have a graph here, so this is kind of how much insulin is on board. This is time. What we would expect is you're going to take your insulin, you're going to have 15 to 30 minutes before it starts kicking in, and then you're going to see that drop and your blood sugar is going to start going down. If we didn't eat, it would keep going down and go on. But the idea is that on that time graph, we want to digest our carbohydrates and the food that we're eating and convert it into glucose into our bloodstream at the same rate, which is the art. It's really hard to predict that, but it's possible if you're able to get that live feedback from your continuous glucose monitor. What happens, we eat the meal, our insulin's kicking in, we eat the meal, and our blood sugar is going to go up. We're going to start digesting more and more of the carbohydrates in our meal. Maybe there's some protein and fat that slow down some of the carbohydrate digestion, or we have some conversion of protein into glucose, and then it'll come back down. And the idea is that the insulin matches that. What we're really looking for is to have not a grand blood sugar spike after a meal. 1, because it doesn't feel good. 2, because it can put some stress on your body. And 3, because it can start us on this roller coaster that then means a correction and then a low and then a high and more actions around diabetes. So when I think about managing my blood sugar, I think about it in 2 ways. I think my doctor growing up taught me to manage my blood sugar so I didn't get like complications when I was older, right? So I didn't get kidney disease, so I didn't lose a foot, so I didn't put stress on my body, increase my risk of cardiovascular disease. But what I learned over time is, yeah, that's super important to me. Also, how I feel today and my quality of life and living in the moment, important. If my blood sugar is 350 at my best friend's birthday party, I'm not gonna feel as good or be as present if my blood sugar is 110. I know that about myself from trial and error. Now, not everybody might feel that way, and that's okay, but that's what I've learned. And really the pre-meal bolus, mastering that is a great skill. And that's true for insulin pump management as well. But on shots, I think it's something really worth looking at. So we talked about our first tip, which was the long-acting insulin, getting the dose accurate, making sure we're taking it within the same hour every 24 hours. And then 2, that pre-meal bolus timing. So how do we do that? What does that look like? There's no right answer. It's going to change based on what's going on with you that day, what you're eating, what type of insulin you're on, so many variables, how much you slept the night before, how stressed you are, whether or not you're going to go on a walk after your meal. There are so many things that can change the way that our body responds to insulin and carbs. You probably already know that if you've been living with diabetes for more than like a week. It's pretty clear that you can do the same thing over and get different responses, I think, from the beginning. If you haven't noticed that, absolutely no shame. It is hard to catch trends in diabetes management unless you're really looking for them, or you know that they're there and then you're saying, okay, let me keep an eye out and see if that's happening for me too. Because often we're not getting education about this. I know that this wasn't something I learned until much later after my diagnosis. So with that being said, the way that I try to match my insulin timing is looking at, let's say I want to eat lunch and lunch is coming up here in a few minutes. I'm going to put something together and I will look at my graph and I will say, where am I? So hypothetically, we'll be in a range that is either high, considering where we are, what our personal thresholds are, high for us, in range for us, or low for us, right? So we'll go through those strategies. And again, Dr. Stephen Ponder in his book, Sugar Surfing, he taught me this at the table in the cafeteria. He wrote it out on a piece of paper, a napkin or something, and finally it clicked. And this wasn't wasn't that long ago. But if you think about, if we're high, there's 3 options here. We could either be high and increasing, high and steady, or high and dropping, right? And then we're in range, and we can be in range and steady, in range and increasing, in range and dropping, and same for low. So that kind of creates 9 potential situations in which we would need to make a decision. And once you start thinking about it that way, you're like, okay, there's 9 different scenarios that I want to start understanding how they work in my body, or what to do that's different for each one. The intent is that we understand that when we are bolusing for a meal, if we are low, let's say I am 59, I am not going to take insulin and wait 15 minutes and then eat my meal. That doesn't make sense, obviously. So what will I do? And this one took me a long time to figure out the shots is I will treat my low, first of all, right? I'm 59. So I will take however many carbs it would take for me to get back up to the number that I choose to be at. So let's say I'm going for 90, I'm gonna have 8 grams of carbs. So I like apple juice, I keep it in my fridge because it's easy and quick. So I have 8 to 10 grams of carbs of apple juice, and then I know that my blood sugar is moving up. Now, if I wait till I'm, let's say, 90, and then I take my insulin and start eating my regular balanced meal with carbs and protein and fat, I will probably have a post-meal spike, because what will happen is my blood sugar will then be in range, and I will take my insulin at the same time as my carbohydrates. I'll start digesting the carbs from the meal faster than my insulin kicks in, and so I'll get that big blood sugar spike, then my insulin will start kicking in and it'll bring me back down. That doesn't feel as good, right? That's not the intent here. What works better, in my opinion, with the blood sugar piece for me is if I wait, so let's say I'm 59, take the 10 carbs of apple juice coming up. What I would do is I would wait until I'm at a safe number. For me, that's gonna be 80, 90. Then I'm gonna take my calculated meal bolus. I already treated with the carbohydrates. I'm gonna calculate my bolus regularly. I'm not gonna add or subtract any insulin from it. I will take unless I'm working out or have some extenuating factor after my meal, but if I'm just gonna sit back down to work, I'm going to take my regular meal bolus and I will watch my graph. So I'm 80, I'm coming up, let's say I hit 90, and maybe I'm flatline for a little bit, and then what will happen is eventually I will have a data point on my graph that will tip a little bit lower, right? You're gonna just start to see that going down. That's when I will start to eat my meal. Because what will happen is it means that I treated my low, I got to a safe range, I took my insulin, and then I started to see that the insulin was kicking in, and I knew, okay, the insulin's kicking in. If I eat and start digesting the carbs quickly, I will have insulin to cover those so I don't get this massive spike. Now, I'll probably still get a spike depending on what I'm eating. That's kind of normal to see a transition in blood sugar postprandial meaning post-meal, whether or not you have diabetes. But the intent is that I don't get this big spike where I'm into the 200s and not feeling as well. What I used to do is I would be 59, I would drink the juice, eat the food, wait till I'm 90, take the insulin, or I would be 59, I would drink the juice, eat the food, and then I would forget sometimes, honestly, and then I'd be like 150, and then I'd take the insulin because I was scared and I didn't want to feel 59 again because that didn't feel great. But the timing is really important now. You have to understand the way your body responds to insulin to do this. You have to be confident with insulin, because to have been low, come up, just be 80 or 90, take insulin and wait is a bold move, right? If you get distracted or you take the wrong amount of insulin because you don't quite understand how your body's going to respond to insulin yet, or those carbs yet, you're creating a situation where you could go low again. That's the real deal. So you want to understand how insulin works for you, and once you're confident in those ratios and pieces, that's a cool tip. So that is how I do a low, and that took me a long time to figure out. I used to just be high after lows often if I had a meal coming up, because I wouldn't get my bolus timing right, because I think about it differently because I was starting lower. If you are, let's say, in that within normal range, that range that you're going for, based on what you and your doctor decide, or you decide personally, is that you will see wherever you are, whether you're moving up or you're flatlined, once you take your insulin and you wait, you will see it start kicking in, and you'll have these dots in a row, whether they're going up or they're flatlined, where you'll see these kind of points, right? And then you'll see that first drop moving down. It's just that first dot that's lower than the last one. That's usually when I think it's time for me to go ahead and eat. Now, I'm on FIASP. FIASP kicks in 15 minutes for me, not for everyone. And so I find that works pretty well. For some people, it's 10 minutes and really, it also depends what's going on, how quickly I see that change. But it doesn't really matter what type of your insulin you're in or how long you have to wait. The point is that you're seeing that change on the graph. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky when you're in range and you're dropping, right? Because you want that insulin on board before you digest more carbs than would treat that drop. But you also don't want to take insulin, make that drop even faster, and then end up low. And I've definitely made that mistake before. Good way to think about this is to look at kind of the rate of the drop. So what I would typically do in this setting, let's say I'm 123 diagonal down arrow, I would probably take my insulin and start eating. What I might do though, let's say I was eating like a meal with a couple different things, let's say I have sweet potatoes and some fish and broccoli, I might start eating like one bite of sweet potatoes, so I've got a little carbs on board so that I'm starting to digest carbs, I don't go too low, then eat the fish and broccoli, then come back to the sweet potato and eat the rest. And that sounds like super complicated, but it's actually less hard than not feeling good after the meal. So with that, I try to strategize my digestion so that I'm not getting too low, and I would start eating sooner, right? Because it's going to be harder for you to know when that insulin's kicking in if you're already at this dropping position. So that one's a little bit more nuanced, and you could even decide your food order or what type of food you want based on that. And maybe if you're eating a lower carb lunch, that means like grabbing an apple to add to it. I don't know, whatever you like. And then when I'm high or I'm in range and increasing, whether my blood sugar is in my high range and it's flatlined, it's increasing, it's decreasing, or I'm in that ideal kind of normal range, but I'm increasing, I take my insulin plus the correction that I would calculate to get to my goal blood sugar number, and I would wait for the dip. And often if I am running high, let's say like I'm 210 up arrow, and I take my correction and my meal bolus, I will have to wait for it to start kicking in, and then it's going to start dropping. I probably won't start eating just right when I'm like 207 or whatever, it's starting to come down. I'm probably going to wait till I'm under 150 because that's going to allow me to get back to this nice range. And then if I have that kind of post-meal raise, I'm not running myself up into the 200s again. Now that, again, more nuanced, everybody's different, but what works about that is really having to watch your sensor if you're gonna do that. If I'm gonna have, and for me, everybody takes different amounts of insulin based on their ratios. For me, let's say like a meal bolus, a pretty big meal bolus, if it's like dinner and I'm having a decent amount of carbs, it might be 6 units. So if I'm gonna do 6 units plus a correction at 210, that would be about 8 units. Now that's a lot of insulin. And if I let that 8 units go unattended and I'm not paying attention and I get distracted doing something else, I absolutely will see double down arrow that I will not be able to catch until I'm lower. That's okay if it happens. Treat it with fast acting glucose. But the intent is if you're gonna do that treatment where you wait longer than the initial change, right, in the graph that says your insulin is kicking in, you want to make sure you are attentive so that you can start eating at the right time. This is harder to do at a dinner party where everybody's gonna sit down and start eating together. It might be easier to do if there's appetizers involved and everybody's eating around the kitchen counter or whatever it is. But really you wanna be at a place where you're attentive to it because that's gonna make a difference, and it's very easy to get distracted and have that low blood sugar happen. That actually happened to me just the other day. We picked up a Chipotle bowl and went to the dog park with our pups, and we were going to let them run around a little bit and then come back and eat. And I bolused for the meal and gave my correction because I was running a little bit high before that. And I got distracted talking to a neighbor, and then realized on my phone I was getting an alarm. I was 70, like double down arrow, and I was like, I bolused for Chipotle. That's so many carbs. I have a lot of insulin on board. I wasn't paying attention, and next time if I'm gonna make a bold move with insulin, I need to make sure I'm paying attention, whether that means turning my alerts differently or just cognitively thinking to open the app and take a look at what's going on more frequently so I can catch the timing right. So I was pretty low before my Chipotle and then had to figure that out, but it worked out in the end. That was just another learning curve. And I think those keep coming, especially when you're transitioning from different types of insulin management techniques or from pump to shots to pump, back and forth. You just have to relearn those things. And so that was my reminder that I wanted to share with you. I feel like it's easier to pick up on the patterns that are happening with your actions and decisions if someone else has explained to you what could happen or how I've messed up or what works for me, and that way you can maybe visualize them or see them sooner in the chaos that comes with diabetes and lifestyle and variables. Again, I'm not your doctor, I'm just a doctor with type 1. These are what work for me. It's important you talk to your doctor before implementing things that you learn on this channel as a whole. We are going to talk about treating lows appropriately, and this is way easier said than done. And you know that if you've had a low where you wanted to, or may have eaten most of what was tasty in your refrigerator. I think that lows have this misconception. We talk about overeating lows, over treating lows, having highs after lows that can spike and then create a roller coaster for the day. Those things happen. Successfully treating a low where you don't have a repeat low or have a concurrent high feels good and allows you to get on with life. Let's start with a real example. If my blood sugar is 45, we're gonna start super low. You may not feel lows, you may feel lows excessively. There's a whole variety, but for me, when I am 45, I feel sweaty, my hands are shaky, I feel a little lightheaded, and the biggest thing is I notice I have a hard time focusing and a really hard time making decisions. If I'm low and I'm doing something, let's say I'm working, I'm typing notes for my patient appointment on my computer, and I'm low, I'll be like, oh, I know I need to go treat my low. Like I need to snack. So I'll be thinking about all the things in my kitchen, and then I'll say, oh, like I could do this or I could do that, but that doesn't sound good. And then I'm thinking about what to do about my low for way longer than I need to be. I keep getting lower. I just need to go treat it. And that happens, I guess, less often now that I've got these techniques around it, but that's something that a lot of us experience. And sometimes I don't think we know that we do that because we're in the moment, we're in this fight or flight state. So I like to talk about the nervous system, very oversimplified, but we've got these two predominant systems, and they don't really work like this on or off situation. It's like a seesaw. So we have our fight or flight system. This is going to be fight, flight, freeze. And that's going to be this kind of sympathetic nervous system that kicks in, that tells us we're in trouble. It's going to change the state of our nervous system. It's going to change our hormones. It'll even change our heart rate often, and it will tell us we need to do something. It puts us in this alarm state. The other side of our nervous system on the seesaw is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is known as the rest and digest nervous system. This is that more calm feeling and really this state that we are in, or kind of work, our human body works well when we are in most of the time. This parasympathetic state is where we will be ideally most of the time. The thought is we've got the seesaw, we're mostly parasympathetic, our sympathetic turns on. We are hunter-gatherers, we are running around in our tribe, we see a lion, we all have to run from the lion, our sympathetic turns on temporarily, and then we are running from the lion, our heart rate's up, we're focused, we get better blood flow to our muscles, we're sprinting, and then we get to a place where we're safe, and over time we calm back down, and then we're back into that parasympathetic. Now, low blood sugars are a fearful state for your body. You don't have to know that. Cognitively, your body knows it. And if you had a low blood sugar before you even knew what blood sugar was, you would respond with this sympathetic dominance, this fight or flight state. And what happens is our cells know, hey, something's wrong, something's putting us in danger. We need to upregulate this side of the nervous system. So when we are in this impending danger, which would ultimately be very low blood sugar, our nervous system changes. It causes us to be shaky, it causes us to release hormones that are associated with that acute stress, that high stress. It causes us to change what we're able to do. Now, the trouble decision-making is often when your blood sugar gets really low, you don't have that glucose in your cells to be able to use your brain cells in a way where they're functioning optimally, right? So it's just a little bit harder to think, harder to function. I used to remember when I was studying a lot in school, if I was reading and I caught myself like rereading a sentence a couple times, I would think, oh, I bet I'm low. And often I would check and I was. And it's funny, it just like changes our brain's optimal function. And I could notice it when I was having a lot of repetition in what I was doing. The point here though, is that when we are in that fight or flight state nervous system, it's harder to make decisions other than to run as fast as we can away from the lion, which is the modern day blood sugar equivalent of eat everything with sugar in our fridge, or at least want to. And so with that, we have to get to this place where we understand when we are low, our body is going to be screaming from the inside out, eat all of the carbs, right? Eat the whole sleeve of Oreos if you eat Oreos at home. Or for me, it happened to me earlier this week, I ate the whole banana, right? Like that was too many carbs. I probably, for my low at that time, I probably needed 7 or 8 carbs, and I ate all 27 of them in my small banana. So the point is that you are going to want to eat more because your body is trying to save itself. Now, what you know cognitively, at least now after watching this video, is that you probably don't need all the carbs that you're going to want to eat. And having that override of that, gosh, I feel like I'm not doing well. I feel like I'm in this state of fight or flight. I feel like my nervous system is at its top peak. I want to do whatever it takes to feel better. We're going to want to overtreat the low. That's going to happen. And so it's going to be important for our brains to take over in that moment and say, hey, I don't actually need all of those carbs. I just need to eat a certain amount that I cognitively know will get my blood sugar back to that range I want to be in. And I need to wait. The waiting is hard. So distracting yourself can help. Now, I'm really focusing on lows in this MDI series because we now have these insulin pumps that are automated that will turn off insulin and help prevent a lot of lows. So where we're seeing, I think, more severe lows or lows that are going to come on throughout the day, you will be treating more maybe just because you'll have more kind of wiggles in your graph that will allow you to need to preemptively treat lows. And it's really important to get that right because on shots, your insulin pump is not going to turn off your basal rate when you're dropping like these new pumps will do. It's not going to increase your basal rate when you're spiking too high either. With that, what we're looking at here is, let's go back to the 45 example. My blood sugar is 45, I'm fight or flight. My hands are shaky, I can't decide what I want to eat out of my kitchen. I'm sweaty and I don't feel good. I might even feel angry and irritable. And sometimes that happens where I'm just like, oh, I'm low again. I wanted to finish this project and go do something I wanted to do and I have to take minutes to not feel good and go treat it. I'm gonna have grace with myself and say, hey, it's okay to be frustrated. You were in a fight or flight nervous system, right? That's like yelling when you're seeing a car coming, get out the way. You might feel more angry because you're in fight or flight. Your nervous system was like, gotta save myself. So some of those thoughts come up when you're extremely low. That's okay. Just say, it's all right. This is happening. You might have to give yourself a pep talk after. I give myself a lot of pep talks. So I'm 45, I'm shaky. I'm doing my notes. What do I do? First, I need to think about how many carbs it's going to take for me to get back to a normal range and what I'm about to do. Am I about to go walk my dogs, or am I about to go back to doing my notes for another 2 hours and be sedentary? In the event that I'm not going to do exercise after the low, what I'll do is think about, okay, how many carbs is it going to take for me to get my blood sugar up to, let's say, 90? So that's 45 points. So if I know that 1 gram of carbohydrate increases my blood sugar by X number of carbs, that will allow me to understand how many carbs. This is something that is worth calculating over time. What's going to make a difference too is, am I 45 because I was just super flatlined and then low, or am I 45 double down arrow and I need to account for where I am adjusting and if I'm going to get any lower before I come back up. So what I want to do is figure out how many carbs for me. Now that's absolutely talk to your doctor about, figure that out. There are calculations. We'll talk about that another time. But essentially, if I were to eat or drink 30 grams of apple juice, I'd probably be high in that setting. If I were to have 12 grams of apple juice, that might be the right amount to bring me back to 90 or 100. So I will measure out 12 grams of apple juice and I will drink that, or I'll have X number of glucose tabs. But what I do is I reserve something in my house and in my purse and in my gym bag and in the car for a low that I know how many carbs. I can calculate it quickly and I have this idea of how much I need so that I don't have to decide mid-low, because that's hard and that doesn't work for me. What's important to know with low blood sugars is, let's say I was like, okay, treated my low, I'm gonna go now do chores around the house and maybe I'm sweeping and walking around. When we are moving, we are not digesting as well. We've got this rest and digest nervous system. If I were to sit down, take some deep breaths, once I started feeling better, maybe focus back on my notes, I'm gonna digest that low snack faster than if I decide to go sweep my kitchen and I'm moving all around my apartment. That's important to understand because I think sometimes we forget that it just takes a little bit of rest if we want that low to kick in sooner. For me, that makes a big difference. So usually what I like to do, let's say I'm at 45, I had my 12 grams of apple juice, I sit back down. I like to do things to try and calm myself back down. I might take some deep breaths, just slow down instead of focusing back on the notes, take a minute to do something that's more relaxing so that I can intentionally make efforts to move myself back into that rest and digest nervous system so that I'm not feeling fight or flight and uptight and stressed out. Then I will wait and I will watch the graph. I would usually give myself 15, 20 minutes to see that I'm moving in the right direction. Now, if I notice that I'm not moving and I'm still 45, I will absolutely retreat. But it's really important to remember that on a continuous glucose monitor, the Dexcom, the Freestyle Libre, really all of them, they all run 10 minutes behind because the way that continuous glucose monitors work is they are testing the glucose in the interstitial fluid instead of our blood fluid. That's about 10 minutes behind real-time blood sugar. What happens is, let's say I'm 45, I start coming up, it's 15 minutes later, my blood sugar's 65. But I can see that the graph is increasing in this direction, right? It's increasing slowly. That number, that 65, when I look at it at the 15-minute point after I treated the low, is 10 minutes behind. So if I estimate 10 minutes ahead on the graph, if I'm increasing, would I likely be at a higher level where I wouldn't need to retreat? Yeah, I probably would. I would probably be at 85 or 90 already where I wouldn't need to retreat. So if I then take more low snack, if I have more apple juice, I may spike myself up into the 150s and 60s. If I wait a little bit longer because I'm trusting my body, I'm feeling better, I'm seeing the graph going up, I understand how much glucose it normally takes for me to get up there, it's what I choose to do is watch and wait that 65 turn up to 70, 80, 90, get to where I want to be. That's hard. You have to trust your settings. You have to understand that's what's going on, but it's really common. And I did this for a long time and I saw a lot of people do this summer when I was working with a bunch of people with type 1 diabetes. Is it's really common to trust the CGM, like the number is exactly what it is. And so we'll be low, we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes, we'll still be low, we'll retreat, and then we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe we'll do it again or we won't. It doesn't matter. You'll probably pop yourself up way higher than you want to be because you didn't think about that 10-minute lag. And so that is an important part of treating lows. We are going to talk about correcting high blood sugars between meals. What works for me is correcting high blood sugars between meals. I've been doing it since very quickly after I was diagnosed. If I am running high after a meal and I wait until my next meal to give the correction, my blood sugars are not in a range where I want them to be most of the time. That doesn't work for me. And so what I'm going to talk about is how I do that and what strategies make sense to implement around it. So really, there are lots of schools of thought with correcting, and the intention is that we don't want our blood sugar to be out of range, whether it's high or low, but for the standpoint of correction, whether our blood sugar is high for many hours throughout the day. One, because that doesn't set us up for success long-term with chronic outcomes that can happen if we have long-term high blood sugar, but also for me, and the most motivating factor is because it doesn't feel good in the now. I know that if my blood sugar is running higher, I feel less present, I feel less able to focus, I feel less sometimes nice. I feel like I'm a little bit more zoned out, tired, not as energetic. Having blood sugars that are not high between meals is important to me because it allows me to show up in what I want to do that day in a way where I feel more like myself, honestly. I look at how long has it been since my last insulin injection. That's, I think, the first question to ask. So I use a continuous glucose monitor. Let's say I ate breakfast and maybe I counted my carbs wrong or something was funny there and didn't get it in a way that was able to keep my blood sugar in range, and so I'm running high. So let's use the example of 250. That's pretty out of range, and that would not feel good for me to continue until my next meal at lunch. So the first thing I see when my glucose monitor rings at me and says, hey, you're 250, is that I want to do something about it. Typically, I would take an action regardless of how long it had been since I had just eaten breakfast. So let's say I'm 30 minutes out from breakfast, I still have all of that insulin on board from my breakfast dose. And I would ask myself, or I would think to myself, is that because I didn't take enough insulin for the carbs I ate? Or is it because I got my timing wrong? And most often it's the timing. I see that like I may have taken my insulin when I sat down to eat breakfast. And so my carbs started digesting and got into my bloodstream faster than that insulin kicked in and started working. And so I get this blood sugar peak, and then my insulin will start working more, and then my blood sugar will come down. Maybe I'll even be low after. And if that happens, if you get the timing wrong, you're actually more likely to be low after the right amount of insulin for the carbs, because you're covering carbs you already digested. And it can create this situation where you've got your timing off and you've got more insulin on board after those carbs are no longer needing to be digested. We're really looking at why. So let's say I'm thinking like, oh shoot, I didn't count my carbs. And scenario one, I didn't count my carbs. I forgot that I had that extra apple with breakfast and I'm 15, 20 carbs off. Then I might think, okay, since I'm pretty confident that the reason I'm 250 right now was because I ate more carbs than I calculated for, I'm gonna go ahead and cover for that apple right now so that I at least know I don't have uncovered carbs. Then I'll wait until 2 hours after that initial injection and see where my blood sugar is. Then what I would ask myself at that 2 hour point, let's say if I'm still high, let's say I'm 200, I might think I have that apple units on board from 1 hour ago. So that's still working. So I might watch and wait. That might be the best thing to do to see. Now, if I noticed I was 250 1 hour after, but I got my timing wrong. Let's say I started eating breakfast, forgot like, oh shoot, I forgot to bolus. And then I bolused and I just digested my carbs from breakfast faster than my insulin kicked in. I would think, okay, I've got a lot of insulin on board for these carbohydrates. Let me wait and see what's going on. Then I get to that 2 hour mark after breakfast, after that initial insulin bolus. And what I'll do at that point is I'll say, okay, if I'm still 200, I'm definitely going to correct. But I would ask myself, like, what's coming up? Am I planning to eat a snack before lunch in 2 hours? Am I planning to go on a walk? And at that point, I would decide whether or not I was going to correct. Let's see. So if I was 250 and then 2 hours later, I'm 200, and I've decided that I covered all my carbs so that the best I knew, I'm going to want to bring my blood sugar down. Let's say it's a good time for me to take a break at work and I decide I'm gonna go walk my dogs for 15, 20 minutes. If I've already got that down arrow, I may not correct. I may wait and see, what happens. I'd drink a lot of water because it's hot here in Texas, and I'd go walk those dogs and keep an eye on my graph. When I got back, if I wasn't still dropping, I might take a correction at that point. If I was planning to go back to work, not eat a snack, just kind of be more sedentary until lunch, I would absolutely give a full correction and keep an eye on things. What's really helpful is that when you talk about or think about correcting between meals, if you always have a low snack available, you can be more aggressive with corrections and keep out of those ranges that don't feel as good in a way that is more effective, because you have that kind of risk management. If you overcorrect, you have the low snack. So when I'm working from home, that works out really well. I can be more aggressive with treating any highs that happen because I've always got apple juice in my fridge, and that's my thing. I go through different phases of what I use, whether it's glucose tabs. I went through a phase with raisins, but the point is that you're really looking at the timing. Now, if I were 200 flatline, let's say 2 hours after the meal, and I wanted to walk my dogs, I might say, I'm not still dropping and I probably need some more insulin. So I might take a half correction and then go walk my dogs, but I'm still gonna correct. I'm not gonna not act if my blood sugar is high and it's 2 hours after the meal. If I notice that I am still high, so let's say I'm not dropping at all, maybe it's an hour after the meal, I noticed the 250, it's an hour and a half after the meal, I noticed the 270. Will I give a correction less than 2 hours after my initial meal bolus? Yeah, I do that a lot. I'm just more careful with it. And I'm cognizant that I have insulin on board from the meal still that's still kicking in. In these graphs, if you look up your insulin brand, you can find a graph on Google pretty simply, pretty easy. If you just go to your insulin graph and then the images, you'll see the time frame at which it's going to peak. So you'll see it start kicking in, you'll see it peak at maybe the 2 to 3 to 4 hour. Everybody's different, but the manufacturer will give you an estimate, and then it'll come down. So if I'm going to give a correction before my insulin is peaked, I need to understand that I'm doing what's called stacking insulin. Essentially, I'm just putting a lot of insulin on board, and I don't know exactly how much it's going to move my blood sugar. Now, you can try to calculate it, absolutely. If I'm going to do an insulin correction at, let's say, an hour and a half after my initial breakfast meal bolus, I would not typically do a full correction at that time. I would calculate maybe what typical correction would be to get me down to where I need to be, and then I would do maybe half or 0.75 if I wanted to do it early, but I just wanted to stop that peak. Now, gratefully, these are not numbers I find myself in often anymore, but you can use the same strategy for lower levels too. You can use this strategy anytime you're above what number you would normally start correcting, or what number you decide. A great way to think about that is what threshold you choose for the upper limit on your continuous glucose alarm. That's actually how I choose it, is where do I want to start correcting? Because that's when I want that alarm to go off, because that alarm is going to signal an action. That way it's not just an annoying alarm that's, hey, you're out of range. It's like, hey, you're out of range and let's do something about it now. So there can be different ranges that you pick. That's customizable. It's something you can talk to your doctor about or decide for yourself. But what I have learned from mentors is that you want to start with a higher range. Maybe that's 250 if your blood sugars are out of range often. And then over time, as you get better at managing not getting to that 250 number, slowly increase that. Maybe you want to increase it to 200, maybe you want it to be 180, maybe you want it to be 150, maybe you want it to be 140. That's a great one for pregnancy based on what our goals are. And it doesn't really matter what that number is for you and what chapter you're in. It matters that high alarm is set where you would typically start to think about giving that correction. That reduces alarm fatigue, and then it actually makes that alarm more useful. So, okay, that's triggering an action. So that's how I have mine set up. Again, not the only right way to do it. There's so many great ways to do this, and so many ways that work that are different for different people. But these are tips and tricks that have really helped me. So absolutely, I correct in between meals. Let's say I gave a correction 2 hours after lunch. I was 200 flatline. I was gonna sit back down at my desk. I gave a full correction. What I would do then is I would wait until lunch. And if at lunch I was 150, I may not do another correction, let's say a unit, which would be my conversion, to get me from 150 to 100 on top of my lunch meal bolus, because I want to remember that I have insulin on board from that correction. And so shots, when you're on shots, it's a lot more calculating, managing, not just thinking about what to do in the moment, but what have I just done? And really thinking at that 2 hour mark, most insulins are going to be peaking. But that doesn't mean they just stop working after 2 hours. Like, they're still going down. It's like a bell graph. And so you'll see it go up, it peaks at 2 hours, but then at 3 hours, there's still some insulin left. And at 4 hours, there might be a little bit of insulin left. And so you want to understand that when you're making these decisions, and create habits of starting to subtract out insulin that you corrected for between meals, so you're not overcorrecting and then creating future lows. I know that was a little complex, but talking it out sometimes is the easiest way to start thinking about these things, and then bringing that new understanding into life where you're looking at your CGM and making these decisions. Even if you are not used to thinking about correcting between meals or previous corrections between meals, that you would change the way you add on a correction or an additional correction at the following meal. These are things to start thinking about. What would happen? Would that be something to do differently? And a great way now that you have to think about it is then you could not do it, or do what you're currently doing, not change anything, but do your current patterns and say, oh, I wonder if I'm low now after this meal because I accidentally double corrected. I didn't think about how that correction between breakfast and lunch hadn't fully finished kicking in, or was still insulin on board, insulin in my system. So when I corrected again at lunchtime, I overdid it, and now I'm low after lunch. At least now you can see, okay, I think I can see where that's coming from. In the future, I might reconsider, or let me talk to my doctor to see if this is okay. You really want to be careful about making changes at home. And I'm not recommending you do, I'm recommending that you talk to your doctor. But I think that these kind of things are really important to start asking yourself, because there can be ways where you feel better if you're not getting the results that you want after meals. And if you have type 1 diabetes, you're probably not getting the results you want after meals often. You may be really good at understanding carb counting. You may be really good at understanding your ratios being perfect, but there are gonna be variables, right? There's gonna be that label that was wrong. There's gonna be that restaurant you ate at where you guessed wrong. And you're gonna have to do more insulin after meals because you didn't get it right the first time. That's gonna happen, but it doesn't mean that I don't have blood sugars that I wanna have in the range that I want them to be in. That's part of it, I think. There are gonna be times where I'm more stressed and I'm gonna need more insulin with a meal because I've got a speech coming up or a test coming up. Those things are hard to calculate, right? There's no like equation for board exam in 4 hours and you use what percentage for your insulin. We could try to make those, but then would they work all of the time? Probably not, right? There's too many variables. So what's really empowering, I think, about the correcting between meals strategy or techniques is that you can make mistakes and still get to places that you want to be for most of the day as far as where your blood sugars are. I always, if I'm giving a correction and I am not eating a meal, I always have low snacks available. I think that's number one, really important. And I didn't go over this in the treating the lows video maybe as much as I should, but it's a lot easier to be confident with insulin dosing if you've got a risk management strategy, which is a low snack in your pocket or your purse or your bag or whatever. And one low snack's usually not enough. If I'm gonna go walk my dog and I'm 200 and I give a correction and I'm gonna go on a 30-40 minute walk and I have one juice box with 12 carbs, I'm not gonna be confident on that walk, because if I go through that correction, let's say I gave a full correction and I go low and I am 20 minutes out from my house and I only have 12 carbs, I might go low twice, right? Might have enough to treat the low initially, but I might not have enough for the whole walk back home. That's gonna leave me not confident. And actually, if I realized that as I was walking, I'd probably turn around sooner. So what I do is multiple low snacks. That way you've got a lot of ammunition for life that happens or making mistakes. And when I have multiple low snacks available, I'm not so worried about correcting. If I'm on a road trip and I've got a whole bottle of glucose tabs in my center console and I'm running high, I'm gonna give a full correction even though I'm driving, because I know that I will see if I start to drop on my CGM and then I'll be able to treat it. But if I've got driving for 5 hours, I can't just have one low snack in the car, right? Otherwise I have to pull over. So have low snacks available, have multiple treatments for what it takes for you available so that you can be more confident with corrections. That is what works for me. That works for other people I know too. But understanding what it takes and then remembering to subtract out activity from corrections between meals and remembering to subtract out previous insulin and looking at that 2 to 3 to 4 hour time range, remembering that insulin comes in a bell curve, not in this kind of on off. It doesn't just stop working in 2 hours. That's important too. So I hope that this was helpful. If this brought up more confusion or questions for you, because this is a new way to think about things, please ask questions below. I am really doing my best to try and explain these complex, multi-variable topics in ways that make sense and are easy to grasp onto, easy to think about, easy to understand, and if you wanted to implement them, easy to repeat to your doctor so you guys can get on the same page about what it is you want to try and understand whether or not it would be safe for you. So I hope that I am doing that, and I am very new at this. So any feedback you have on these types of videos, covering these types of topics, would be really helpful. I'm open to corrective criticism. I'm also open to understanding what's working so I can repeat that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It'll allow me to make more free videos for people with type 1 diabetes like you. I appreciate you being here, and thanks for listening all the way to the end.